Good evening. Tonight's storytelling is entitled Grimm and Grimmer, and that came from a request that I had for one particular story and then another poem, and so I said I would pull out the stops and come up with things that are wonderfully morbid. I'm going to start with a couple of poems that were written for children in the middle of the 19th century. The book was called Strollpater, and it was written in Germany as an entertainment for children. The subtitle is Merry Stories and Funny Pictures. And they're horrible. They're absolutely awful. One day, Mamma said, "Conrad, dear, I must go out and leave you here, but mind now, Conrad, what I say. Don't suck your thumb while I'm away. The great tall tailor always comes to little boys who suck their thumbs, and ere they dream what he's about, he takes his great sharp scissors out and cuts their thumbs clean off, and then, you know, they never grow again." Mamma had scarcely turned her back. The thumb was in. Alack, alack, the door flew open, in he ran, the great long-legged scissor man. Oh, children, see the tailors come and cut out little suck-a-thumb. Snip, snap, snip, the scissors go, and Conrad cries out, "Oh, oh, oh!" Snip, snap, snip. They go so fast that both thumbs are off at last. Mamma comes home. There Conrad stands and looks quite sad and shows his hands. "Ah," said Mamma, "I knew he'd come to naughty little suck-a-thumb." Augustus was a chubby lad. Fat, ruddy cheeks Augustus had, and everybody saw with joy the plump and hearty, healthy boy. He ate and drank as he was told, and never let his soup go cold. But one day, one cold winter's day, he screamed, "Take the soup away! Oh, take the nasty soup away! I won't have any soup today." Next day, now look, the picture shows how lank and lean Augustus grows. Yet, though he feels so weak and ill, the naughty fellow cries out still, "Not any soup for me, I say! Oh, take the nasty soup away!" The third day comes. Oh, what a sin to make himself so pale and thin! Yet when the soup is put on table, he screams as loud as he is able, "Not any soup for me, I say! Oh, take the nasty soup away! I won't have any soup today!" Oh, look at him. Now fourth day's come. He scarcely weighs a sugar plum. He's like a little bit of thread. And on the fifth day, he is dead. What a wonderful Christmas gift. And I first came across him when I was in high school. And the second one of these is one of the first poems I ever took the trouble to remember, which will tell you a lot about me. The first is Little Willie. Little Willie, full of glee, put radium in Grandma's tea. Now he thinks it quite a lark to see her shining in the dark. And the one that I first memorized. "There's been an accident," they said. "Your servant's cut it off. He's dead." "Indeed," said Mr. Jones. "Then please bring me the half that's got my keys." There was once a man who had 12 children, and he had no idea how he would feed them. And when his wife became pregnant with a 13th, he was at his wit's end. And when the child was born, the first question in his mind, as it should be with anyone, was, who will stand as godfather? He had run out of godfathers in the village. And so he went out desperately, trying to find a godfather. The first person he met on the street was resplendent. He had never seen anybody that looked so beyond compare. And this person said to him, I understand you're looking for a godfather. I am. I would be glad to stand as godfather to your child. Well, who are you? I am God. He thought for a minute and he said, with all due respect, I really don't want you as godfather to my child because you give all the money and the riches to those who do not need it and let people starve. Now, according to the Brothers Grimm, he did not understand the nature of the way that God distributes wealth. I have other opinions on the matter. The next person he met was a well-attired, handsome gentleman. Said, I understand you're looking for a godfather. I would gladly stand as godfather to your child. And who are you? I am the devil. And he said, I don't think so. You are the king of all liars, and I do not want that for my son. He went further, and he met a figure that he could barely see. He was solid, but he could make nothing of his shape. And the figure said, I understand. You're looking for a godfather for your child. I am. I would gladly stand as godfather for your child. Who are you? I am Death. Now he thought about this, and it came to him that Death, if you had to have a supernatural godfather, Death would probably be about the most handy. And so Death came to the christening. It was an amazing affair. All of the family was there, and Death stood as godfather to the baby. And all were quite impressed. And very few noticed the 3 or 4 elderly relatives he took with him on the way out of the church. When the boy reached young manhood, Death came to him in the street and said, I am your godfather. Come with me. It is time that you receive your christening gift. And he took the boy out into the woods, and he plucked an herb and he gave it to the boy, and he said, that herb will cure any malady that can be mentioned. I give that to you. You shall be the finest physician in all the land. And here is how it will work. I will accompany you to any patient's bedside. If I stand at the foot of the bed, then the patient is going with me, and there is nothing you can do. But if I stand at the head of the bed, then you will administer the herb, and the patient shall recover. And so this happened, and he got a name for himself as a physician throughout all those lands. And indeed, he lost some patients, but he was always honest when he said that he could not cure a patient. But when he could, he did. And none knew that his godfather was helping him in this situation. Well, the time came when he was summoned to the bed of the king. And so he went with his herb and stood in the royal bedchamber. And he looked down at the king, and sidelong his eyes went to the head of the bed and to the foot of the bed. And at the foot of the bed stood death. And he thought, I cannot let the king die. And a thought came to his mind. He is my godfather. He would not harm me. I will cure the king. And so he picked up the king and rolled him so that his head was at the foot of the bed and that his feet were at the head. And so that death stood at the head of the king. And death glowered through his skeletal, non-existent eyes, and he shook his skeletal fist. But there was nothing that death could do. But the doctor knew that death was furious with him. Well, the king recovered and was so grateful to the doctor that he said, you shall have my kingdom when I die, and you shall have my daughter to be your bride. And they wed, and it was a beautiful wedding, and the young royal couple loved each other with all of their hearts. But before long, the queen's health, for now she was queen, the queen's health began to diminish. And the doctor looked at her as she lay upon the bed. He got out his herbs, but again he looked to the head and to the foot. And at the foot stood death. And he said, surely, surely he would forgive me if I did this. I do this out of love. I do this to save the life of my beloved. And so he gently moved his beautiful young wife so that her head was toward death and her feet were again away from death. And he gave her the herb, and she recovered. But before he could take a breath, the doctor found himself in a great cavernous castle. And in that castle, upon the floor, were countless candles, some of them long and tall, some of them short. And beside him stood death. Do you see what those candles are, my godson? I see that they are, but I don't know what they mean. Each of those candles is the life of a human being. The tall ones are those of the newborn. They are of the children. They are of the young, and those who are destined to have a long, long life. The short ones are those who will not be on this earth very long. Where is mine? Said the doctor. Where is yours? Over there. The doctor looked, and he saw just the stub of a candle just about to flicker and go out. And he said, okay, is there anything that you can do? Can you put it on another candle? Can you give me another? Everyone is given but one candle. That is yours. But I will attempt to elongate it And so with his skeletal hand, he picked up the stub of the candle and made as if to place it upon a new and unlit candle. But it slipped from his skeletal fingers and fell upon the stone floor, and the wick went out with a psst. And with that, the godson of death went to the land of the dead. There was once a little girl who was disobedient and adventurous, which is a very dangerous combination. And her parents warned her, do not leave the house. You have been leaving the house and going and wandering. Do not leave the house. She said, I have heard of a lady by the name of Frau Trude. I want to meet her. No, you don't. You do not want to meet Frau Trude. Nobody wants to meet Frau Trude. I do. If you go seeking Frau Trude, you are not our daughter. But she did not heed her parents as she should. And into the darkness she went. And she looked until she followed her senses to a strange cottage far beyond the village with only a flicker of light in it. She looked in the window and saw something that terrified her. She walked up the stairs and saw something that terrified her even more. And when she knocked on the door, an old woman with a kindly face answered the door and said, "Oh, my darling, you look to have taken a fright. What did you see, my dear?" I saw 3 men on the stairs. One was covered in black. Oh, that is the charcoal burner. One was covered in green. Oh, that was the hunter. And one was covered in blood red. That is the butcher. What else did you see? When I looked in at the window, I was looking to see you, but I saw a face that looked like a denizen of hell. Ah. You saw me in my true form, my dear. But let me look at you. Yes, I have been waiting for you. I have been waiting for you long. You will burn bright. You will burn the brightest. And with a wave of her hand, the little girl became a fine log of wood, and Frau Trude put the log on the fire and said, "Yes, you burn bright indeed." There was once a miller whose luck had completely deserted him. No work had come to him at the mill. There was no money to be had. And he was out one day gathering wood just simply to make a fire at the house. As he was chopping wood, an old and finely dressed man came to him and said, Why on earth would you be chopping wood when you could have riches?" "Well, where would I get riches from, might I ask?" "Oh, well, I will give you all the riches you could desire. All you have to do is give me that which is right behind your mill." Well, he thought, he must be talking about the apple tree that's behind my mill. "Well, of course you can have that," said he. And he went home, and his wife met him at the door and said, "The house is full of gold. The house is full of money. Where on earth did this come from?" "Well, I met an old man who said that all I had to do was give him what was behind the mill, and he would give me riches. And so I gave him the apple tree." She said, No, our daughter was out cleaning behind the mill. He meant our daughter. When is he coming for her?" "He's coming for her in 3 weeks' time." "Here is what we will do. Make sure she is bathed. Make sure she is bathed, and make sure she draws a chalk circle about her when the devil comes." And so she did. The miller's daughter bathed herself, and around her she drew a chalk circle. And when the devil came to get her, he stood at the rim of the chalk circle and he said, Miller, you promised me that I would have what was behind your mill, and that is her. But she is cleansed. I cannot touch her. Make sure when I come again that she has not bathed." And the miller indeed did that. And the next time that the devil came, she wept and she wept and she wept upon her hands, and her hands were clean. And the devil said, "I still cannot take her. You must take those hands off of her body. Go and chop those hands off, and I will come back for her again." And the miller looked at his daughter whom he loved, and he said, I am sorry, but I must, or he will take me." "Do what you will, Father. You are my Father, and what you say I must abide by." And so he chopped off her hands up to the elbow. But when the devil came back, she had wept so much that the stumps themselves were washed clean. And the devil said, "I cannot take her at all." And he disappeared. The miller said, "Come, daughter, come back into the house, and we will care for you." She said, "I cannot stay here. I will leave. I will go out into the world, and people will treat me with kindness when they see my affliction." And so she did. And her 2 severed arms were strapped through to her back. And she walked, and she walked, and she walked. And she found herself hungry, but there was nothing for her to eat. She came to an orchard, and in that orchard there were pear trees with the most beautiful pears that anyone has ever seen. But between the pear trees and the maiden was a moat. And she went down upon her knees and she prayed, "Oh, that I could have one of those pears. I will die if I do not. I cannot find other food." And there was a great light beside her. And when she opened her eyes to the light, she saw that an angel stood beside her. And he said, "You shall have a pear." And he opened a sluice so that the moat drained away where she might cross. And into the orchard she went. And she came to a pear, and with no hands to pluck it, She simply ate it with her mouth as it dangled from the branch. The gardener saw this, but he also saw the light that was beside her, and he shook with fear and wonder. And the next day, when the king came out, the next morning, and he counted the pears, and he said to his gardener, "Gardener, there is a pear missing." And the gardener said, "There was a beautiful spirit that came. It had no hands, and it ate the pear with its mouth. I feared to say anything." And the king was wonderstruck by this. And he said, "I will stay this night in the orchard, and you will show me this wonder." And so the king and the gardener stood in the orchard. And that night they saw the light again, and they saw the beautiful maiden with no hands come and eat another pear. And the king stood forth because he had never seen a maiden so beautiful, and he said, "Who are you? Are you a spirit? Are you sent from God?" And she said, "No, I am but a poor miller's daughter, and I was hungry." And he said, "You have been touched by angels. Come into my castle, and you shall be fed." And so the king brought her into the castle, and he gave her food and fed her himself. And he fell in love with her. And he married her, and she became his queen. He had silver hands made for her. She could not move them, but at least they were a comfort. Not long after, the king was called away to war, and so he left the queen in the care of his elderly mother. And he said, "Make sure that she is taken care of, and when the child comes to term, please let me know." Now the queen's mother loved the queen with all her heart, and when the time came, she was overjoyed to help her deliver a beautiful, beautiful baby boy. And so she sent a note to her son, the king, saying that he was the father of this wonderful child. But the messenger, on his way to the king, was tired and sat beside a stream and fell asleep. And the devil, who had not yet had his revenge, decided to take it now. And so he took the note out of the messenger's backpack and put a note of his own in. And when the note came to the king was told that the queen had delivered herself of a hideous changeling. Well, the king said, he wrote very quickly to his mother and said, "Make sure that the priest comes and blesses the child, and make sure that my queen is well taken care of. This must be a grievous, grievous pain to her," and sent that back with the messenger. But the messenger fell asleep again by the stream, and the devil once again switched letters with him. And so the queen's mother was horrified to see that a letter had been written to her to send to the king the eyes and the tongue of the queen. No, this cannot be. No. And she sent a letter back asking her son, "Is this true?" But that letter was not received. And the king sent a letter back requesting, asking, how is my queen? The queen sent, the queen's mother, king's mother sent a letter back to him saying, all has been done. You will find the eyes and the tongue when you get here. When the king received this letter, he was full of chagrin, and he came back as quickly as he could, and he said, what is this about eyes and a tongue? Where is my wife? And she said, you demanded that she be killed and the eyes and the tongue be taken out. Well, here they are. And he was filled with horror when he looked at this, and he wept. And his mother knew that the letters had been a lie, and she said, no, she is alive, but I sent her away. I sent her away because I feared that you would kill her. He said, do you know where she has gone? I do not know. And so the king left, and he searched throughout his kingdom and others for his wife. The queen had gone forth with the baby strapped to her back, and she walked again as far as she could until she found an old man by a large tree. And the man looked at her and he said, I want you to take those arms, those silver arms, and wrap them around this tree 3 times. And as she took the arms and put them around the tree again and again with a silver cord, she found that her own hands had been restored to her. He said, you cannot stay here, but go to that house. There you will be given rest and care. And she went to the house, and there was a beautiful, angelic maiden there who met her. And she said, stay here with us. You will be safe. And she stayed. Meanwhile, the king searched and searched and searched. For 7 years he searched until he found himself at the threshold of that house. And the glowing maiden brought him in and said, you rest, lie down upon this bed. And he did. And he placed a handkerchief over his face, and he lay. And the glowing maid went into the next room and said to the queen, your husband is here. Come, let him rest, but look upon him. And her little son, whose name was Herzeleide, heart's sorrow, went forth, and he saw the man. He had no idea who he was. He pulled the handkerchief from off his face. And the queen said, no, put the handkerchief back upon your father's face. And he said, he is not my father. I have no father. You have told me I have a father in heaven, but there is no father for me. And the king, hearing these words, sat up. And Herzeleide looked upon him, and he said, you would say that this wild man is my father? And the king said, indeed, your mother looks very much like my wife, but her hands were of silver. And she said, my hands have been restored to me. And with that, and with the look, the joy that came upon the king's face, Herzeleide looked up, and he recognized his father. And the three of them were united, and they returned to his kingdom and were happy for the rest of their lives. And that is the story of the maiden with no hands. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you weren't too disappointed at the happy ending of the final story. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again next week.